Gen is makes MongoDB, which I think a lot of people who watch the show will are users of. It's very ambitious, and I think would be considered risky to create a new database. So can you talk a little about that?
Sure. Yeah, it's definitely it's a hardcore technology problem. So you don't go after it lightly.
And people like switching databases is such a it's very hard to get people to switch databases, right? So it's sort of thought of in the, let's say in the venture business, is like a really tough nut to crack.
And on top of it, you might not even start it in New York. You'd be nervous about starting in New York, which has never really had a database company.
Yeah.
But between and this wouldn't happen without Dwight and without Elliot Horowitz, who's the other co-founder of that, who was our top engineer at DoubleClick. And those are probably two of the most brilliant engineers I've ever worked with. And so it's really their work that created this. And we just felt like when companies had scaling problems, and we could see it on the other side, it was never the content, because CDNs work great, there's no problem there. It's the database. That's the biggest problem. And the problem is that there's so much more data now than there ever was. And so databases even 10 years ago weren't created for that in mind. And so what the world needs is an easier, faster, cheaper database. Oracle works okay, but it's unbelievably expensive. And so when I see a market where people are making 40% profit margins on a huge market, I think, there's probably a better way. And so far that's the case.
And the other competition besides Oracle on the other end would be something like MySQL.
Absolutely.
Where, I mean, from my own experience, it's very, very difficult to sort of sync across servers and do all sorts of things that are required for scaling, right? Which is the primary problem that Mongo is addressing, right?
Absolutely.
And so how did you, so created sort of a new database company and sort of all this developer, you basically have to rally the developers behind it, right? So how do you do that as a sort of a marketing problem?
So as a marketing problem, first of all, we made it open source. And so that's important. And all we focused on for the first year and a half was adoption. So obviously first creating the product, making sure it really does work, and then helping the community. And so we had community events all over, meetups. There's a lot of process there to make sure that you're listening to your customer in a way, if they're not paying you right then. You're building up this infrastructure and ecosystem. So we have a lot of people contributing, more than contribute to MySQL. And I think that community is very healthy.
And so I can get the database for free, it's open source, but it's sort of like MySQL's business model before they were sold, where they charge for services on top of that.
Absolutely. So now we have hundreds of clients that pay. There's some people who don't want to use something and rely on it unless they have a maintenance contract. There are other people who need training. So there actually are lots of ways over time to charge. The open source model ultimately is one that's going to have lower revenues than if it weren't open source, but it's also going to have lower costs. So it can be a very good business model. Look at Red Hat. Red Hat's a very successful company.
But in theory, some consulting company could come along that provides those same services. You have no proprietary advantage over, besides the fact that you're sort of the company that created it and have all the leading experts, right? You have no other proprietary advantage.
Right. And the reality is that that is an enormous proprietary advantage because no one else knows the product. It's a hard technical.
It seems
problem.
like there's been about 5 really successful open source companies. All of the ones that were successful had the creators of the open source project on the team, as far as I know.
You have to. And look, we set this up as a commercial vehicle, so we think it'll be valuable someday, and we think that by being valuable means that we can invest a lot more, have more resources, support the community, and so I think it's really is more similar to many internet business models, which are sort of a freemium model where maybe only 10% of the people who use it pay for it, and they pay for added services, and 90% get it for free, and we think that's great.
Well, it's also interesting because it develops sort of bottom up through the organization, which is like in the old days, right? Like enterprise software meant golfing with the CIO and spending a year convincing them to get it in their budget. And I think what these open source companies did, and I think what you guys are doing, right, is sort of like the developers start hacking on it.
Absolutely.
Suddenly the organization discovers there's 1,000 instances of this thing around here. We better figure out what's going on and why it's so great, right?
No, it's exactly it. It's and then you'll find that they're using it in one area just a little bit, and then find someone will say, actually, it works better and it's cheaper and it's easier to use here. Why don't we use it in 2 or 3 areas? And then all of a sudden 6 months later, like we could use it everywhere. So we have now companies talking to us for 500 servers, 1,000 servers, and really committing themselves to Mongo. And so this year is when we'll start signing $1 million deals with large companies.
I think tell me if I'm wrong, if you look at the economics of these businesses, that the margins on the actual product are lower, but you have a radically lower cost of sales because you're not having to hire this huge sales team to go.
What happens is literally every day, because I get the emails every day, is someone calls up, we didn't even know they were using the product. and says, oh, by the way, I've been using it for 6 months, works great. I'd like to have a maintenance contract now. Can I send you $5,000? $5,000. And we're like,
sure.
okay.
That's good business. Okay.